Clarity on Fire, a podcast for people who know what they don't want out of their life and career, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing.
In a world where it's easy to exist, but hard to feel alive, we, Kristen
and Rachel,
2 certified life and career coaches, are here to help you cut through the information overload, get unstuck, and focus not just on how you can have a career you're passionate about, but how to create a whole life that feels fulfilling.
So join us here, where we serve up inspiration and down-to-earth wisdom in a way that only 2 best friends can.
We want you to experience the relief of knowing that, yes, you're allowed to want more out of your life and career.
And no, you don't have to wander through the dark anymore. Our job is to light the fire that shows you the way. Let's go.
Hey.
Okay, for those of you listening on the podcast, you won't think that we're doing anything different, but I do want to say that we actually are doing something new. We are going to start doing once a month. We're going to do I guess I could call it live podcast, but it's not really live because...
Well, you're not watching live. It's still recorded, but it is going to be video as well as audio on YouTube.
Yeah, so we're going to start uploading sitting down, Kristen and I having a conversation version of the podcast every month. I'm also going to start, don't hold me to this, people, I think I'm going to start uploading new podcasts just with like a title card and the audio so that people who want to watch on YouTube can watch on YouTube or just listen on YouTube. And I'm also going to start going back and archiving, like bringing back particular podcasts and uploading them to YouTube so that if you like to listen there or watch there, or if you have friends who are like more about videos than podcasts, great. So this is the very first time we are doing a YouTube version, video version of a side chat. And that's what we're going to do probably once a month when we do a video. It's going to be the side chat.
When we're just sitting down having a conversation, just the 2 of
Yeah.
us. So if you are finding us through YouTube first, we have a podcast. Yay! So if you like these videos, then you can come join us on our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher and all the normal places.
Anywhere you find podcasts, search Clarity on Fire. And we have almost a year's worth at this point of content that I'm probably never going to upload to YouTube. So make sure that if that's where you're watching us, that you go back and you binge listen. We are excellent for binge listening, okay?
We've had a lot of people tell us already that they found us, and within a week, they listened to like
everything.
50 episodes.
So, okay, for those of you, again, I apologize to our podcast listeners because you all know this already, but just in case you're new, I'm Rachel.
I'm Kristen.
That you know the difference between our voices and our faces now, which I don't think we look like, I don't think we sound alike, but
we still get mixed up all the time, and it's fine.
It's fine. It's because we're both INFJs and a lot of other things in common, which we'll talk about later. Okay.
We're just the blonde girls. It's easy to mix us up. It's fine.
Not that blonde today. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, once a month we do side chats. It's a really stupid play on words, but I like it because
I like a good pun.
Clarity on Fire side chat. Do you get it?
Get it?
Is it entertaining? No, not really. Okay, that's fine. So side chats are different than any other podcast we do. It's literally just we sit down, we turn on the microphone or the video now, and we riff on a subject with very little preparation. Like, I don't have any notes. I don't have an outline. All we have right now is a vague idea of what we want to talk about. And the reason I'm hoping that's enticing and appealing, rather than why the hell are you just sitting down and recording something with no plan, you seem scatterbrained, is because I think that conversationally sometimes the best things happen when you're not trying. And also, this is just how we talk. This is how we hang out. And we're 2 BFFs who run a business. So in my mind, this is the most authentic you're going to get, is us talking unplanned, unprompted.
We do some workshops throughout the year where we do have a whole list of topics that we want to get into, and it's well planned and all of that. But we have these kinds of conversations all the time, just between us. And we thought it would be cool for you to be a fly on the wall sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so today we are talking about something that Kristen and I have both struggled with.
The opposite version
like,
of.
Pretty much our whole lives, just on 2... I'm trying to, do this so that
opposite sides of the same spectrum.
Two opposite sides of the same spectrum. So, okay, I think I'm going to ask you about you first, and then you can ask me about me. How do you feel about that?
Let's do it.
Okay, good. I didn't plan that. I was just like, okay. All right, so we're talking about the difference between feeling like you're either too much or you're not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll get into later why it's actually the same problem. Like, it's the same core root problem, just manifesting in different symptoms. But, so I want you to tell me what you grew up feeling for the most of your life like you were not enough.
Yes.
So I want you to tell me and them what that actually means to you. Because I think everyone defines it differently, but I think the people who resonate with not being enough will probably like be nodding their heads at your description.
Yeah. So feeling not enough has like a dozen different heads to it. And so
it's like a Medusa situation.
Yes, exactly. And you'll cut one off and like 3 more grow.
Yeah.
So it might be, I'm not smart enough. I'm not interesting enough. I'm not attractive enough. All these different I'm not blank enoughs. Or just I, myself, and not enough. That's fine as it is. That still
just
counts.
Like the whole kit and caboodle is not enough. Okay.
Right. So I'll tell you how some of those versions have showed up.
Yeah. I want to hear how it's manifested. Like, yeah. I know, but they need to know.
Right.
What does that actually mean?
So I'll give a few examples. The first one that comes to mind is I used to have a fear that I'm not smart enough. And that came from, I think it really came from being called smart my whole life. Yeah. And being put in smart classes and being saying you get to go to these special schools because you're smart.
Well, you were
but when you do that,
you went to governor's school and you were in the magnet
gifted programs and all of that. Right. And so when from the time you're in 3rd grade, people are calling you out and saying you're smart and you get put with all these smart people. I was with really smart people in my classes.
And you start to over-identify with that. Like,
yes.
That's the only valuable thing about me.
Yeah, a couple of things happened. That was one. I over-identified with this external label that was put on me.
Okay.
And so any moment when I didn't feel smart, if I didn't know the answer, if I had just a stupid mistake, it felt like my whole identity at my core was being shaken. I'm not smart enough. Mm-hmm. And if you add that on to the fact that I was surrounded by really smart people. I mean, people in my high school were getting perfect SAT scores. They went to Ivy League schools. Like, this was my, that was my whole high school. It was just those people. We were separated from all the other people in public schools.
Right. Unlike going to a public school, which I did, where I easily graduated in the top 10. Mm-hmm. Like, was one of the smartest in comparison to all the other people, because I turned down the offer to go to governor's school because I was like, I don't want to leave my friends. Thank God I would have been one of the dumbest people there.
Right. If you take the top 10% and put them all together, you don't feel like the top 10% anymore.
No, you're not the top 10 anymore.
And so any moment when I didn't feel quote unquote smart in that moment, I felt like, oh my God, I'm not smart enough. And that felt really hard. And so I would do things like overcompensate, or I would act like a know-it-all, which was not cool.
Oh my God, it was one of her defining characteristics for when I first met her in college. She was like, you were really almost like passive-aggressively a know-it-all. And I say that now because I'm allowed to say that.
Because I agree.
Yeah, she agrees, and she's changed. Anyway.
Yes. And so that would be how it would show up. I wouldn't try for things where I thought I might fail because I didn't want to look stupid, because I was so afraid of my identity being called into question. So I felt like I was constantly trying to prove that I was smart.
Yeah, I remember when we went to coach training, which was 7 years ago, you wouldn't raise your hand and you wouldn't make comments. She wouldn't ask questions.
Yep.
And it was because she was afraid of asking something stupid or looking dumb. And this is in a room where you have the most accepting, like nice, well-meaning people, but you were just like terrified of looking dumb and you weren't thinking about it. This was totally unconscious.
Yes, absolutely. This was just reactive. This was protective. It was so much fear of looking stupid and not knowing who I am without that label of smart that I just wouldn't try for things. I wouldn't speak up. So that was a big one.
That was one, but smart was not the only way you felt inadequate.
No.
Lest we think that there was only one category.
I won't even get to them all today, but that was a big one. Another one was, I'm trying to think of the best word for this. I think it might be, I think at the core of it was I'm not interesting enough.
I think you thought you were boring.
Well, right. That was the flipped version of I am boring. But that was because I was...
You were too quiet.
I wasn't super talkative, at least with new people, with my friends, watch out. But with new people, I was a little bit more reserved, and I don't have this big performer personality. And I attracted a lot of friends into my life who did have really big personalities, who were performers, who were very comfortable in front of a crowd. And here I was being like, oh, I hate this. This makes me uncomfortable. So clearly I must be kind of boring or timid or shy or something.
Right.
I'm not
enough pizzazz.
I'm not charismatic enough. I don't know what the word is exactly, but that was the gist of it. And so I would do a couple of things. One is I would just not try for things, right? I would just not try out for...
You wouldn't raise your hand. You wouldn't ask questions.
Right. I wouldn't try out for solos and I was in chorus. Or I actually took a drama class, which was ridiculous, but I only did backstage stuff. I would never... So that would, I didn't want to do anything that would put me out there and make me feel uncomfortable because I thought, well, I'm not really interesting anyway. Mm-hmm. Or I would try to pretend to be more confident than I was, or pretend to be more interesting than I was, which just felt like putting on a show, which felt like I wasn't really being myself. I think that didn't go over well either.
I think that's where some of the passive aggression came from, to be honest, was you were like trying to overshoot being opinionated, but then you just kind of came off as a know-it-all because you were trying to be interesting. Right.
And saying, no, I do know what I stand for. Just pushing it too far to the other side.
Which is a normal
to try
thing.
To make a point.
Yeah, it's very common.
But that didn't feel quite right either. So those are probably the two biggest ways.
I would agree.
I didn't feel enough. And they manifested in all kind of different ways. But my reaction to them was either hold back or go too far to the other extreme, but in a weird pretendy kind of way.
Inauthentic feeling way.
And it always makes you feel like, gosh, everyone else must have something I don't have. And why didn't I get that gene? Why didn't I get the charisma gene? Or why didn't I get the getting a perfect SAT score gene, right?
Yeah.
And you always feel like I have to overcompensate for not being enough. Or I have to continue to prove that I am enough, even though on the inside I don't really feel like I am. But I'm so afraid of other people seeing that lack within me that I have to try to project it out to you, even when I'm not feeling it. It's exhausting. It is utterly exhausting to try to prove that you are enough when you don't feel like you are enough.
Okay. So we're going to exercise the demons here. And we're going to... But I think we've got to flip the script first. Okay, right? So
you have had the opposite problem where you have felt your whole life like you are too much. So again,
lest you think it's like, you're too beautiful, you're too smart. No, that's definitely, I have felt inadequate in lots of ways, but I never felt like I was too smart or too pretty. Right. I did not suffer from that.
It shows up very differently when it's the too much problem. So tell us what that feels like.
I don't think I can break it down into categories because to me it's just one lump sum. It's just one thing. So I'm loud, not on purpose. I just
vocally loud.
I can project. Yeah, no, but that's the thing is I am really loud. Physically, I can be talking to someone, and if you're in the other room, you will only hear my side of the conversation.
Yeah, I remember that from college.
You won't hear the other person.
We were roommates in college, and across the hall, it sounded like she was having a conversation with just herself.
I mean, that has happened. But that's not what was happening then. Okay, so too loud, boisterously just loud. I can't help it. My brother is also really loud. Sorry, Russell. My dad is also just got a booming voice and is just loud, and I've never been quiet. I cannot be quiet. I don't process anything quietly. No, you don't. I don't do a lot of internal processing. All of my processing is external, and so I'm very vocal. I also get I get angry very easily. When I get triggered, it doesn't necessarily show up so much as, woe, it's me, I'm so sad, I'm just gonna sit here in a corner. It's more like, who can I beat up? What can I hit? how much screaming am I capable of doing?
Well, this is actually, you're putting it in categories. I would say too loud, too explosive. Might
too
be
intense.
the right word. Too intense.
Mm-hmm. Intense. Okay, it's because I've been told to rein it in, tone it down, like do less, because no one's gonna like quite that much energy, quite that much personality, quite that much opinions. Right. Opinionated is a really big aspect of being too much, is that the intensity of your belief in things, the intensity of your, your fervor is just not appreciated. And you're going to have to just rein it in and walk it back and toe the line. Right.
You're going to make people uncomfortable. You're going to push people away, turn people off. Yep.
And I've been told this particularly in romantic settings.
Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to scare men away.
I'm not going to tell you who told me that I need to tone it down in order to be lovable.
Yeah.
Because men can't handle a woman who has a lot to say, who has a very like fiery personality. Mm-hmm. There's there's not two types of people. There's an infinite array of people. But I've often been around people who like are the opposite of me, like you, who I like to think of like you as like very soft and you're very gentle and you're naturally very quiet and you're patient and you're flexible and you're like pastel colors, which is funny because I'm wearing like pastel colors right now. And I'm just like not like that version of femininity is not mine. I'm like whatever the opposite of that is. Darker colors, bolder colors, loud, hurricane, not gentle rain, And it's just a lot of people, men, women, and everybody, they don't always like that. And I think what I've told myself is that it's easier for people to be around people like you. People who are quiet and they're not going to push your buttons as much. They're not going to trigger you as much. They're just easier. They're more lovable. And honestly, it's kind of true. It's kind of not true. But in my experience, I have seen people really like you, just instantly like you. They gravitate toward you. Strangers come up to you in the grocery store and they just want to tell you their whole life story. And to be honest, I don't want that to happen to me. That's really effing annoying. But people don't have that reaction to me. Where you have like this general mass appeal where it's like everyone's going to go watch that movie and everyone's going to walk away feeling like they've had a pleasant experience. I'm the movie that people watch and they either love it and they become a cult fanatic of it, or they say, this is the worst movie I've ever seen. It's hot garbage. That's kind of how I feel about when you're an intense person, you have a polarizing personality. And that can be triggering because it makes you feel like, oh my God, I have to watch what I say so that I don't make people hate me.
It's fascinating that you're saying that because in the past I've had the exact opposite experience of feeling like because big personalities have so much to say and they're bubbly and they have a lot of opinions and they're charismatic.
I redact that.
Well, bubbly's not always part of the mix, but
no.
They're charismatic and they have a lot to say and they're interesting, that they must be a whole lot more likable than me, who feels like, oh, maybe I'm kind of boring. Maybe I don't have enough interesting things to say. Maybe I'm unlovable. Because isn't that what it all gets down to?
Yeah.
Am I likable? Am I lovable? Because that's what we all want. We all want to belong.
Yeah.
And if you feel not enough, then you feel like you're not deserving of people's attention because you're not interesting enough, or you're not whatever enough,
or
smart enough.
You're pushing people away with the force of your personality, which was my experience.
Right.
People don't want to be around that, and so this gets down to belonging. And I was just listening to something, I can't remember what I was listening to, where they were talking about belonging. It was a podcast of some kind. If I remember it, I'll do something about it. I'll cite it. I don't know. Okay, it was one of those things where I'm quoting someone who was quoting someone. So God knows if I'm even right now. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Not everything you hear on the internet is true. But one of the things they were saying is that scientific studies have shown that belonging is like maybe fourth on the list of things humans need most. It's like water and oxygen and food and then belonging. We're talking before shelter.
I believe that.
Because we're so biologically wired to survive in groups and in order to survive sort of in a caveman type of setting, you can't be ostracized.
You cannot survive.
You would die. And so it's more important that you have a group than it is you have, a temporary shelter in your biological mind, because at least if you're with the group, you're safer than if you're on your own, but with shelter, so to speak.
Yep.
So the need to be to feel like you belong is paramount, and that's why it doesn't. So the point of us kind of illustrating the vast spectrum of what you can experience is that no matter what, everyone is worried about not belonging, and everyone is worried that they're not enough in some way. And to be honest, being too much is just being not enough of, like, I'm not quiet enough. I'm not calm enough. I'm not, adaptable enough.
Right. Or I'm too boring, or I'm too quiet.
Yeah.
Or I'm too ignorant about something.
Yeah.
So it's literally the exact same thing.
It is. Right. It's all getting the same core.
I want to ask you the question, when you say not too much of something or not enough of something, I want to ask, in comparison to what?
That's a really good first question.
If you are too much of something, that must mean that there is that you're comparing yourself to something that's like the perfect amount. So I want to first ask you, who are you comparing yourself to? Some of you might have someone who comes to mind right away and says, I'm too interesting, or I'm too interesting.
Wow, well, you're too narcissistic as well.
I'm not interesting enough compared to, do you have someone in your life who you feel like is really interesting and is really magnetic?
My sibling is like super interesting or super charismatic. Everyone loves them and no one likes me.
So when you think of them, you feel less than in comparison. So that's a really important thing to consider. Who comes to mind? Also, maybe no one comes to mind, because I think we also all walk around with this concept of the perfect person. The perfect person who's like the perfect balance of all of the good qualities and none of the bad qualities. This person doesn't exist, by the way. No. But we all aspire to be this perfect person. And so in comparison to this nebulous perfect human, I'm too much of this and not enough of this.
Well, I also contend that if we were to meet the perfect person, we would hate them.
We would not like that person.
I just feel like if the perfect person...
The perfect person is boring.
That's what I'm saying is, right, if you're just walking the line between like too much and not enough, you're just like the exact right mix of opinionated but not too opinionated. And interesting but not too interesting, because then you're going to trigger everybody else who feels like they're not enough.
Right.
Then I just feel like you don't belong anywhere. That's what happens, is when you try to please everybody, you please no one. And if you're comfortable enough, well, if you're able to be comfortable with the very, very uncomfortable fact that you can't please everyone, and you're able to just kind of be yourself, what happens is you will turn some people off. You will polarize some people. But the people who remain are the people who actually see you and like you for yourself. And, they're not accepting you just because you're mirroring back what they want to see.
Right. Oh, well, yeah. Speaking of that, if you're a people pleaser and not feeling good enough, or feeling too much of something, I mean, God help you, that's just the worst combination. We do have a whole podcast episode about people pleasing and how to deal with that, but that can absolutely exacerbate things. Yeah. Because now I feel like I'm not enough, but I feel like I have to be in order to please you. So,
well, and I have to put on this whole, you have to put on this whole separate personality just to get you to like me, which is one of the most honestly, I think that's a really good point, is that this is incredibly heartbreaking.
Yes.
Because it gives you this really terrible paradox, which is that in order for me to be accepted and to belong, which we've established is incredibly important to humans, it's like oxygen, it's so critical, that in order to be accepted, I have to change the essence of who I am. But in getting acceptance, you're not actually accepting me. You're accepting some other person that I'm pretending to be. And so I don't feel like I'm accepted anyway, because I know that who you're accepting isn't really me.
It really
so it's a lose-lose situation.
And then you get really stuck, because now you have to feel like you have to keep being that other person.
Or you just keep performing.
To hold on to the love and belonging that you've gotten. And it's It's terrifying to strip that persona away.
But that's why it's heartbreaking. And like, if I were to boil it down to the essence of what we're both saying, just from different perspectives, is that believing that you're too much or not enough and that you have to change or become less than or more than in order to be accepted. What you're really saying is that I can't be myself and be loved and accepted. I have to choose. Mm-hmm. I have to choose being myself and then maybe being rejected by everybody, or I have to choose not being myself but being loved by everybody. I can't have both things at the same time, right. Which is a terrible, and honestly, that is exactly how I felt. For like most of my life, I felt like if you want people to love you, particularly in a romantic sense, because friends, I feel like the bar is a little bit lower. They don't have to want to be around you as much. They don't have to want to like share a home with you. I mean, there's a little bit less of there's a lower bar. But if you want to be like really loved and accepted, then you can't be you can't be the fullest of who you are. You just can't. Which is the most heart-wrenching experience. Because it's like, well, then I would rather be alone. To be honest, if that's my choice, I would rather be alone because I don't want to be accepted. I can't, first of all, I can't tone it down. Right. So it's not even possible.
Right. Well, and
so I have to be alone because I can't do it.
You're saying, given that choice, you would say, I have to be alone. I think a lot of people would say, I have to be someone else. Because that sense of belonging is so important to me.
I agree.
That my only choice, if I don't want to feel alone for my whole life, is to be someone else. And what a terrible prospect for a life. So the reason why you feel like you have to make that choice between being yourself or being loved and accepted is that clearly there's something broken within you. That's why I'm not enough or I'm too much, is I'm broken.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to fix myself. Mm-hmm. And that's where we all get so stuck. And that's also heartbreaking to think that you are inherently somehow broken.
Yeah. That there's some sort of faulty wiring that created you and that something went wrong somewhere. And so you've got to go back and fix it so that people will like you and that they'll accept you.
Or hide it, or just hide the broken parts because you don't know how to fix them. Mm-hmm. So you just shove them away. So hopefully no one will ever see them. But then none of us are ever vulnerable and fully exposed because we're so afraid that you're going to find those broken parts. It's an exhausting way to live life.
I'm tired just talking about it, to be honest. Okay, so okay, let me just get back to asking you about you for a second.
Okay.
You were really afraid, I think, for a long time of just being vulnerable and letting people think that you're dumb, maybe.
Yep.
Like, ask a question, let people think that you're dumb. What they think is about them, it has nothing to do with me. Like, their perception of me is not reality. And if I have to let someone think I'm dumb, or if someone has to walk away feeling like that is the loudest, most obnoxious person I've ever met in my life, so be it. Mm-hmm. But how did you do that? Or how did you start doing that, maybe?
Well, don't get me wrong. I still don't love moments when I feel stupid.
No, I mean, who's like, I feel like you would have to have some sort of weird kink. Where you just liked, I mean, there are people like that. They go to the S&M chambers and they're like, make me feel like a POS. I love it.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on there.
But that's not you.
No, that's not me. So it's not like it doesn't affect me at all anymore, but it just doesn't take me down to that low place where I feel broken anymore. Now I have really done a lot, and I don't know how to tell you exactly, because this took years, but I really did, over time, start to separate I said something stupid or I messed up from I am stupid.
Yeah.
Or I don't know anything, or I'm whatever. I'm not smart enough. So I have isolated those incidents more often by recognizing that I'm a smart person even when I do dumb stuff. Everyone does dumb stuff.
Well, and you've already proven enough that you're smart.
Right.
You don't need to go prove it anymore. You've done all of that work by now.
So by reminding myself of the difference between what I did and who I am, that really helped.
Yeah, your actions and your identity are not the same thing.
Right. I also will say, and maybe this came from being more exposed to more people through having a business. Yeah. I don't know exactly. But I will say it's become a lot more important to me where the feedback is coming from.
Oh, yeah, really good point. Yeah. If some random troll on the internet thinks you're boring, or they think you're too, or if someone comments on this YouTube video and they're like, yeah, you are boring, and yeah, you're not pretty, really loud,
and you're obnoxious.
I would be like, I would feel nothing, to be honest, because like your opinion, it doesn't matter to me at all.
Right.
You have no effect on my life.
So having a few core people in my life who know me so well and have seen all aspects of me and still like me, like, I know I'm likable, right? Like, I know I'm likable even if not every person I meet likes me. And in fact, I've flipped my framework around that to certain people not liking me is probably a good thing.
Yeah.
So feedback from people who I don't respect or I really don't agree with, or I know that they're coming from their own place of lack and it's not really about me, I can let that go now because I can see it's not really about me. And a lot of what triggered me into feeling not smart enough or not interesting or enough or whatever was other people's reactions. And because I've become a coach and I understand the inner workings of people's minds on a deeper level than ever, I can now pretty clearly recognize their reactions are not about me. So if they think I'm not smart, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say to that other than just like, yeah. Also, the dog is barking right now. I'm sorry you guys can hear that. This is not the most professional podcast setup. I'm sorry about it.
We're working with what we got.
You're not interesting enough. You're not well produced enough. See how much I care. Okay.
So I'm sure you have some ways that you have dealt with this as well. In terms of when you have that sensation of I'm too much, how do you respond now that's different than how you used to respond?
Well, okay, I'm going to agree with you that I think it's really important to take note of the people in your life who don't agree with you, who think, no, you're perfectly interesting enough, or I don't care that you're loud and obnoxious. And also, no one's ever really called me obnoxious. I'm just calling myself that, so I don't want to feed the flames here. But
I don't think anyone's ever called me boring either. I just called myself that.
I mean, they might have been thinking.
Sure.
I don't know. But I think that recognizing the people in my life who don't actually agree with that, is really critical. And I think we all have at least one person. I cannot believe that if you're watching this or listening to this, that there's no one in your life who would disagree with you and say, actually, I think you're really cool. Actually, I think you're really interesting. I don't understand why you think this about yourself. And I'm not saying that we should lean on other people's interpretations of us in order to make us feel better about ourselves. I think when you rely too much on what other people think, whether positively or negatively, you don't have enough of your own sort of inherent confidence, and you need your own internal, you need a sense of internal fortitude and identity, regardless of what anyone else thinks of you.
Absolutely. But it is helpful to see yourself through other people's eyes sometimes, especially people's eyes who see you in such a loving way. Yeah. That really can help you get out of your own head for a moment.
I have a handful of people in my life who would never say that about me and have stuck by me and who think I'm really funny and who just, when we go out to eat, I'm the one making people laugh. I'm the one saying things that usually only people are thinking. And that tends to be refreshing in a way, I think, to the people that we know. And so I think that for the very things you worry about are often the things people value the most about you and the things that they see as benefits, not as handicaps.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So, okay.
So seeing yourself through different eyes through someone who loves you and appreciates you as
I guess
you are.
I wasn't done talking about how this relates to me or what I did. Okay, but so I think that I'm not totally done worrying about how it relates to me in a romantic sense. I think in a friend sense, I've mostly got it covered because I have so many people who have accepted me and who do like me for who I am. And so that was easier to prove because I had a lot of evidence, you know?
Right.
The romantic thing, because I am still single, which is fine, but I am, you know, like, no one has married me yet for this winning personality that you currently see. So that's fine, but I don't have that evidence. I don't have that hard evidence yet. So how do you believe something when you don't have hard evidence for it is actually a really good question.
That is a really good question.
And I don't know. This is a side chat. We're not supposed to have all of the answers. This is just us sort of posing questions and having a conversation and figuring out in real time how we feel about this.
Well, what's coming to mind for me right now is when I have those kinds of thoughts, I'm not enough of something, or maybe I'm too much of something else, I will sometimes imagine like a 6-year-old version of myself saying those things.
Yeah.
And that breaks my heart think of, because most of these developed when you were really young. This is the scared kid inside of you feeling like, oh my God, I'm not going to be liked at school, or I'm not going to be loved by my parents, or whatever the fear is, that we don't have these fully developed brains. And so we develop these fears and they stick with us our whole lives. So I imagine this kid version of myself feeling that way. And instead of feeling shame or like I want to hide, instead I feel like I want to wrap that little kid in a hug. And I feel so much compassion, and I'm able to be a lot gentler with myself in those moments when I'm like, oh, this is just a scared kid part of me. It's okay. You're going to be okay. You are lovable. And I can be a little bit more reassuring.
I think that's a good point, that for some reason there's this age at which we stop thinking we deserve to feel like we're enough. Mm-hmm. And that nobody, unless you're a crazy sociopath, is going to look at a 5-year-old and say, you suck. You're not smart enough. You're not interesting enough. You're too loud. You're too, just like, do less. You don't say that to kids because inherently you understand that they're valuable just because they are. Yeah. For no other reason than they just exist. And at some point, we let that go. And we stop thinking that we deserve that level of compassion and empathy and respect. And we don't. I don't understand really why we make that shift and we lose our innocence and therefore we don't deserve that level of treatment. But you still do. It's a really good point, is that you still deserve that same level of consideration.
You're still the same person.
You're still the same person. Like, I mean, you might be older, but you're still inherently the exact same person that you've always been. I think, so as I was kind of thinking as you were talking, about the question of like, why am I a lot more okay with just who I am now? And at least in like the idea of in like a romantic sense, not feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to be too much for some dude. I think actually comparing my past experiences gives you, like, it enables me to mine and like make a really good theory, which I think applies to all of you guys, which is when I was trying to be somebody else, or kind of what happens is then you'll start to overcompensate, like we talked about. Yep. So even I would overcompensate. I'd be like, well, this is who I am, so get used to it. And so then I would do I actually would go too far, and I would be too bossy, or I'd be too controlling, or just opinionated for no freaking reason, because it was like I wanted to be accepted for who I was. And so instead of just being myself, I was like leaning way hard into it, which was
almost testing people.
Exactly.
To see, can you really handle
kind of like jabbing them and being like, will you stick around now? Will you stick around now? Will you stick around now?
Yeah.
And so when I was trying to be somebody other than who I was, I did not have great relationships. I was not happy. They were not happy. I felt deflated. I felt like, is this really as good as it's ever going to get? Because I'm depressed, if that's the case.
Yeah.
And I actually feel like if me not being myself created a bunch of relationships that I didn't like being in and that were not satisfying or fulfilling to me at all, then the opposite would logically be that being myself would actually create the best and the most fulfilling of relationships, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
I just feel like sometimes you've got to go with the barometer of how you feel. And I think that sometimes if you're feeling like crap, that's the best indication that you're completely misaligned.
Right.
And so I think that that's a really good indication of, for those of you who are saying, but maybe You've spent this whole time listening to this, and I know there are some of you out there, and you're going to feel really called out right now, but I love calling people out. So, you're sitting there, and there's some of you who are still thinking, but what if I really am too much? Or what if I really, like, I get you, I heard you, but maybe I am kind of boring. But maybe I just am boring, okay? Like, some people are born boring. I know some of you are,
almost defending your sense of lack.
I know that some of you are doing that. But here's the thing. The way that you can tell that it's not true is if it feels like crap to believe it.
Yes.
The more something feels like crap, the less true it tends to be. We as humans, this is it's a widely known thing in sort of like a spiritual realm, but it's not talked about in a more human kind of, just sort of everyday sense. We don't talk about this, but humans are actually born with the inherently really good barometer for measuring how aligned or misaligned anything is with them, and that's your feelings. You have feelings. So
here's an example.
Okay.
If someone told me, or if I felt like I'm not athletic enough, I would be like,
you're right.
Yeah. That's fine.
I kind of suck.
And I wouldn't feel bad about it. I wouldn't feel much of anything around it. Some of you might really identify with that.
If you identify as an athlete.
Because athleticism isn't something that matters to me. I don't have a strong value around it. It's never been an identifying feature of me. And so when someone calls me that, I have no energy around it because it's not actually a part of who I am. When someone says, you're not smart enough, well, I know I'm a pretty smart person. Maybe I'm not Einstein, but I'm a decently smart person. So that feels really bad because it's going against something that is actually true and that on some core deep level I do know is true about me. And so it's hurtful to imagine or to hear something that's contradicting the truth. And so if it feels really bad for you to say, I feel too much of something or not enough of something else, the reason it feels bad is because it is inherently not true.
It's creating internal dissonance. That's why it feels bad, is that it feels off. It's like nails on a chalkboard or two notes that are pinging at the same time that don't go together. And so it's clashing.
Yep.
Whereas if you have alignment, you have harmony. It sounds good. It feels good. There's no clash. There's no dissonance whatsoever. It just feels aligned. And so I like when I think about, you know what? I like who I am. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to be around me. And I have plenty of friends who appreciate me. And I'm either going to be in a relationship with someone who appreciates that about me, or I'm not going to be in one at all. Like, that feels totally fine to say. But me compromising who I am feels completely like garbage.
Because it goes against who you are.
It goes against the core of who you are, and it goes against what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
So, okay. I feel like we need to start wrapping this mofo up. Okay.
So first of all, please leave us a comment. Tell us which one.
I wasn't done making my point.
Oh.
She's just like rushing me to the end.
Well, leave a comment anyway, but let Rachel finish.
Better than that. I was going to sum up some of our past points.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Wow. I was going to say there is no such thing as too much or not enough. That's kind of the major, nail that I want to strike here at the end, is that it is an illusion. Because first of all, in order for something to be too much or not enough, you would have to have one fixed point of comparison. You would have to have a standard by which we're measuring.
Which does not exist.
There is no standard, because there literally is no standard quote-unquote person.
Yep.
So there literally is no such thing. So when you're saying I'm too much of one thing or I'm not enough of another, you are making this up in comparison to some completely arbitrary standard that doesn't exist. And the reason you do it, everyone is doing it. Sum up point 2. There's literally not a single person on the planet who doesn't do this. If you think you're the only one walking around feeling inadequate, I have to tell you that literally every person, regardless of how successful or not that they ever were, how liked they were or not, felt this way. I mean, Oprah feels inadequate a lot of the time.
Beyonce feels inadequate. I guess Joanna Gaines does, although she's closest to the perfect person I've ever found.
But everybody has this because it's biologically wired into you, because you need to care what other people think of you in order to survive.
This emotional response is a protective mechanism
that everybody has.
And it's really trying to benefit you, but it warps things, and it actually leads you to more unhappiness and failure.
Here's the interesting thing, is that biological imperative to survive and to belong is helping you survive. It's helping you make sure you don't piss anybody off so that I stay safe. It's helping you make sure that you don't ever go too far so that you don't get ostracized. But in the day and age we live in, surviving is not thriving.
Right.
So it'll help you stay small and stay safe and make sure no one ever notices you, or make sure that everyone kind of steers clear of you if that's the kind of vibe you're giving off. But like it won't enable you to actually be loved and accepted.
Right. We are in a different stage of humanity and society, most of us. So we don't need that anymore. It's a protective mechanism, but it's outdated. So we can upgrade our programming a little bit and say what's really true here.
So third sum up point. Being loved and accepted is dependent on people knowing you. Knowing who you really are. Which means sometimes you have to risk being rejected by the people who don't like or appreciate or understand who you really are, and that is okay, because and it's going to be scary. There's no world in which you can open yourself up to rejection and feel nothing about it, because you're human and you're supposed to care. You have empathy, you have a heart. It does hurt when you get rejected, but the toll you pay, like the risk you take, and it's worth it, is that the right people see you, acknowledge you, and really understand you for who you are. And there's nothing better than being known and liked and loved because of who you really are, not because of who you're pretending to be.
Yes. And I think you said there's a chance, or there's a risk, or sometimes you
No.
might get rejected.
I should have said all the time.
You will.
At some point, it'll happen.
You will. And that's just your indicator. Those aren't your people. It's not an indicator that you're broken and you need to fix yourself. It's an indicator, oh, that's just not one of my people. Okay, great. Move on. That's it.
Yeah.
So,
wouldn't it be radical if you just decided, what if there was nothing inherently wrong with me? And what if I went with that assumption first? What if I started there instead of first assuming there must be something wrong with me? I think it would be radically, it would just be wild if everyone just assumed, I'm good. I'm fine. Let's go from there.
Yep. Even if you could just pretend for an hour that that's true, that would be progress.
And lastly, put yourself into other people's shoes. Find one person. And you know what? If you want to be really vulnerable, ask that person how they see you. And don't ask them for all the flaws that you have, because God knows we have flaws. It's not like any of us are perfect. Kristen and I could air plenty of each other's flaws right now if we were getting catty, but we won't. But ask that person how they see you. What do you think are my best attributes, and why do you appreciate me? Why do you want me around? I think that would be really cool.
You can also look around at people in your life and say, I like them, and is it because I think they're perfect?
Yeah, why do I like the people around me?
I like them because they're quirky and they're weird, and I like their awkwardness sometimes. I think it's endearing. And so I want you to remember, why do you like people? It's the same reason people like you. It's not because they're perfect. It's because they're lovably imperfect, just like you.
Yeah. Okay. Now we can sum up.
Okay. So now I do want to know which side of the spectrum do you fall on? First of all, let us know that.
Yeah, do you identify with being too much? All my ladies and fellas, raise your hand. And then if you identify with not being enough.
You can be specific too. You can say, oh, I'm not blank enough, or I'm too much of something.
And if you identify with being that person in the middle, I say, please don't comment, because I don't believe you. I think you're a liar, and I think you've got some exploring to do.
That you're the perfect amount of everything?
My dog is too loud. She falls on the spectrum of loudmouth. Sorry, she just had to be here today. I couldn't help it. And she has a lot to say. She's like her mother. I don't like referring to myself as a mother when it comes to a dog. I think it's a wee bit creepy. But anyway.
Fur mom, dog mom.
I don't like it. But she doesn't call me mom because she can't talk.
No. I don't even think she knows your name.
No, I don't think she does. She just knows me as that lady who feeds her. Okay, so if you're listening to this on the podcast, come leave us a comment on our site. If you're watching on YouTube, you're welcome to click over to where this is on our site and leave a comment, or you can just leave a comment right here on YouTube. And for those of you, especially who just found us, whether it's on the podcast or on YouTube, we want to make sure that if you like Clarity on Fire and you're digging this conversation and you want a lot more like it, and you don't know where to start, like you heard the intro of this episode, the whole, we help people who know what they don't want, but aren't sure what they'd rather be doing, get clear on their passion and their direction in life and all of that, and you want to know where to start, go to clarityonfire.com, take the passion profile quiz. It's really quick. It's 11 questions. It'll help you in about 2 minutes. You'll get a result, downloadable PDF that helps you really just from the get-go start figuring out the intersection between your career and your passion.
It's the very first step for figuring out what you want to do, what you really care about, how to align your work with your life.
Yeah.
And it's quick. It's free.
If you've been stuck and overwhelmed and you want to like get some direction and a sense of fulfillment, but you just have like no idea where to get started, and you're also tired of a lot of the advice that just doesn't work, start there. Okay, so we will see you on the podcast. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, go over to the podcast because there's so many archived episodes, and
we post a lot more there than we post here.
I'm not promising I'm gonna post regularly on YouTube, like once a month, and then everything other than that is just bonus. But everything will be on the podcast. So search Clarity on Fire on your podcast app, and we will see you on the podcast for sure this coming Tuesday
with the blog.
With a blog, which we do every Tuesday. Okay, so see you there.
See you there.
Bye.